I happen to be a huge fan of Paul Verhoeven, and trust me when I say that, of all his movies, I'm particularly biased towards his 1987 classic, RoboCop, and by a mile, if I might add. To me, the film was a perfect blend of science fiction, action, satire, and somehow the extreme brutality on display felt oddly satisfying. Naturally, I loved it when the R-rated flick was adapted into a children's animated show, which, in my opinion, did its best to keep things interesting, and most importantly, kid-friendly, without losing the whole charm of a part-man, part-machine law enforcer. Aired as part of the Marvel Action Universe programming block, this 12-episode cyberpunk superhero series was produced by Marvel Productions in association with Orion Pictures Corporation. Anyway, this brings me to the main content of today's video, and I have a question for all of you. Do you think the 1988 RoboCop animated television series had a dramatic series finale? Join me as I explore how the RoboCop cartoon came to an end. Everybody ready out there? Let's kick this off. Turning an R-rated satire into a kids' show. Every time I think of Verhoeven's RoboCop, which has Peter Weller in the titular role, a lot of things tend to cross my mind. Given the film's uber-hardcore violent nature, I'd be lying if I told you that I wasn't surprised when the movie was made into an animated series aimed at kids, who, to be honest, weren't even allowed to watch the original film in the first place. But before I delve into the cartoon, I want to talk briefly about the narrative of the 1987 film. Written by Edward Neumeier and Michael Miner, Verhoeven's RoboCop takes place in a crime-ridden and heavily corporatized near-future Detroit. When police officer Alex Murphy gets transferred to the Metro West precinct, he is brutally killed by a gang of ruthless criminals while pursuing them with his new partner, Ann Lewis. The all-powerful organization OCP takes Murphy's body and revives him as the crime-fighting cyborg RoboCop. With no memory of his former life, RoboCop is programmed with three core directives: serving the public trust, protecting the innocent, and upholding the law. But of course, things don't go as planned when RoboCop gradually begins to regain his human memories. Well, I think it's safe to say that Verhoeven's RoboCop is packed to the brim with excessive amounts of gore and violence. Believe me when I say that the criminals in the movie are maimed, mutilated, and even melted for that matter. So yes, the 1987 flick unquestionably has some of the most notorious graphic violent sequences on display. Additionally, the Dutch filmmaker intentionally whipped up an ideal concoction of explicit corporate satire and dark humor to emphasize how cruel and desensitized the corporate world of the future would become. This not only led to the movie becoming a massive success, but it's also considered one of the best flicks of the 80s. So much so, the film's popularity ended up creating a franchise, which finally brings me to the main focus of today's video, the 1988 animated series, also titled RoboCop. Inspired by the original film, the RoboCop cartoon continued to follow the adventures of our beloved cyborg cop. I really loved that the basic premise remained unchanged. The opening title sequence briefly showed Alex Murphy being gunned down by Clarence Boddicker and his gang, thereby mirroring the events of Verhoeven's movie and staying true to the source material. Having said that, the cartoon also made some visibly prominent changes. For starters, handguns were replaced with lasers and blood with sparks. And I don't think I'm wrong in stating that the science fiction setting underwent a major change when the film was reimagined as an animated series. In addition to robots being a more common thing in the series, Detroit is also portrayed as being more technologically advanced. As for our Super Cop, the animated version is far more agile. Unlike the live-action version, which moves rather slowly and heavily, the animated RoboCop is much faster, categorically having a better range of movement and being capable of performing acrobatic feats than the live-action version could possibly ever show. While characters like Ann Lewis remain largely the same in the cartoon, Dr. Tyler is the creator of the RoboCop program instead of Bob Morton. Add to this Dr. McNamara, who is the creator of the Ed 260 and serves as a recurring antagonist in the series, and the finale bringing back Clarence Boddicker. In short, it's important to keep in mind that the animated series is set in an alternate continuity, and that the cartoon made numerous changes to make it more suitable and age-appropriate for children. Episodic justice. How the series told its stories. Allow me to break down 3 important things here that the animated series resorted to. I'll begin with the series' episodic nature. You see, every episode functions as a largely independent story. In fact, every half-hour slot that you look into will establish a threat within the opening minutes. It can be anything from a high-profile assassination attempt or an environmental disaster to a sudden gang war. The whole idea is that the plot is set up to present a challenge, put RoboCop's tactical prowess to the test, and then resolve the entire problem in that same episode. Secondly, the series doesn't feature continuous narrative development. There is no build-up to a season finale, which, if you ask me, leaves little lasting effect on the characters. However, there is no reliable evidence confirming that declining viewership was the specific reason the cartoon ended. In fact, you may have heard the popular claim that the animated series was initially supposed to have 13 episodes, but Marvel Productions decided to use the money intended for the final episode to fund the pilot for a different project, Pride of the X-Men. However, this story has never been confirmed by a reliable contemporary production source, so it's best treated as an unverified rumor rather than an established fact. Anyway, moving on, I'd also like to talk about the show's self-contained moral lesson at the end of each episode. I mean, take any episode. You're bound to find the story wrapping up with a clear thematic message. It was this structural repetition that ensured that, no matter how chaotic the science fiction action became, Alex Murphy would always restore order at the end of the day. Come to think of it, the whole format was quite constrained. The final run, Night of the Archer to Into the Wilderness. For a better understanding, I thought, why not take a look at the final block of episodes that led up to the finale? By the time I'm done taking you through all the last few episodes, trust me, you'll have a fair idea of how the cartoon wrapped up and why its ending felt so abrupt. Let's begin with the episode Night of the Archer. Here, RoboCop is seen investigating a man calling himself Archer. In Archer's words, he represents the forgotten people, the homeless, the hungry, and the hated. For those of you wondering, yes, he is pretty much Robin Hood here, as he's repeatedly seen winning the hearts of the poor and homeless with his actions. While the majority, including Officer Ann Lewis, see Archer as a visionary of the future, RoboCop isn't convinced. He believes Archer to be a criminal and wants to bring him to justice. Soon, Archer turns out to be a fanatical leader who triggers massive civil unrest across the city. And the stakes escalate when Archer also ends up orchestrating an assassination attempt. Lewis is finally able to see past the whole Robin Hood facade, and by the end of the episode, Archer is revealed to be a wealthy corporate figure carrying out a personal vendetta against his rival company, OCP. He never cared about the poor. He was simply using them. Next, we have the episode Rumble in Old Detroit, where a gang war breaks out when a horde of new, illegal, and highly advanced weapons is stolen from the evidence room of the Metro West police station. With rival gangs attacking each other and threatening to completely tear apart the city, a young man with a personal connection to Sergeant Reed gets thrown into the mix. Of course, the half-man, half-machine law enforcer steps in to stop the madness and put things back in order. In the 10th episode, titled A Robot's Revenge, the plot takes an interesting turn from the usual street crimes and shifts to matters like global politics and terrorism. Here, Lewis and RoboCop are tasked with protecting 2 prominent Middle Eastern political leaders who have come to Detroit to draft and sign a peace treaty. However, before the peace agreement is signed, an upgraded Ed 260 robot makes its way inside the high-security premises to assassinate the delegates, acting on the orders of 2 terrorists. It goes without saying that the newly upgraded Ed 260 acts completely like a rampaging assault droid and proves to be a serious match for RoboCop. It's only after RoboCop's able to find the robot's flaws in its armor that he's finally able to dismantle it. Finally, we have Into the Wilderness, which happens to be the penultimate episode of the series. Here, RoboCop finds out from an environmental biologist that the local water supply is contaminated and the natural wilderness is being destroyed by an OCP factory. In response to RoboCop confronting the people responsible and threatening to shut down the factory, they dispatch a swarm of robotic dogs and a powerful tree-clearing machine known as the Ravager to stop him. No points for guessing that it's up to RoboCop once again to be the knight in titanium armor, shut down the factory, and save the ecosystem. Okay, by now I'm quite sure that you've already realized that each of these episodes tends to rely on standalone episodic threats. While I agree that there are recurring elements, such as OCP's greed playing a major role in the series, there is simply no denying that the show circles around a few topics or themes rather than focusing on a single ultimate showdown. Had there been events leading to a final confrontation, or let's say a single final villain maintained throughout the series, instead of having a vigilante in one episode and a faction of terrorists with their own political agenda in the next, things could have surely been different. At least, that's what I firmly believe. If you have something else in mind, let's hear it in the comments section. Menace of the Mind, the last case of Alex Murphy. Written by Roger Slifer, Menace of the Mind happens to be the final broadcast episode that marks the end of the animated series. As we follow the story, we find that a hazardous microcircuit amulet known as the Zip Chip Collar has been manufactured and sold illegally throughout the city. So far, the cops haven't been able to track down the collar's origin or deter customers from buying them. According to reports, the collar accelerates the brain's synapses, enabling the mind to operate as effectively as a computer. This means that many business people find the collar appealing despite the risks involved. And the collar is particularly attractive to school students who feel compelled to wear it for obvious reasons. Well, ask yourself this. Who wouldn't want to ace their finals and still have the time to party, right? In any case, a key component of the collar is a biochip manufactured by OCP. But no points for guessing that the president of OCP vehemently denies having any official connection with the collars to the press. Now, it's a known thing that OCP has always prioritized profits over people, and as the narrative progresses, the viewers find that although OCP manufactures the biochips being used in the collars, their unauthorized use has been threatening the company's reputation. With the police receiving a tip, they dispatch a unit to take care of the situation. When RoboCop resorts to his infrared night vision, he finds an aerial craft rapidly approaching them. When the powerful aircraft opens fire on the unit, RoboCop pursues the plane and, to his utter shock, finds that the one distributing the collars is none other than Clarence Boddicker, the criminal gang leader who killed him when he was Alex Murphy, and whose very actions led to the creation of RoboCop in the first place. Boddicker gains the upper hand in the fight, and RoboCop loses one of his robotic arms in the process as he falls into the water below. While RoboCop is being treated by Dr. Tyler, the president of OCP addresses the remaining officers about a new OCP initiative that will help them combat the new threat in RoboCop's absence. The Ultra Police Team, which consists of Ace Jackson, Wheels Wilson, and Birdman Barnes, is introduced to the Detroit Police Department as its new ally. In the meantime, right after RoboCop recovers, he immediately goes after Boddicker, flying the formidable craft known as the Robocopter, which is equipped with state-of-the-art technology. While traveling, RoboCop confides in Lewis that he saw Boddicker, and what follows next is a flashback of how things actually went down for Murphy. So, in a way, Boddicker's very presence induces emotional reactions in RoboCop, suggesting that his human memories are still intact. As the story moves on, the Ultra Police Team is seen taking on Boddicker and his gang, but despite being heavily proficient and having an array of high-tech weapons at their disposal, they're unable to capture Boddicker. In fact, had it not been for the timely intervention of RoboCop, things would have certainly taken a turn for the worse. Later, when the Ultra Police Team offers to help RoboCop, he asks them to help him find Boddicker. The Ultra Police Team raids Boddicker's headquarters after finding it, and after Boddicker manages to escape, RoboCop engages him in a dramatic aerial fight. I don't think I'm wrong when I say that RoboCop nearly gives in to his desire for revenge, but he ultimately chooses to make the right decision. Instead of killing Boddicker, RoboCop arrests him, thereby proving that he is a law enforcer at the end of the day and not a murderer. I have to say that Lewis also plays a particularly important role here as the human counterpart, as she trusts her partner's judgment and doesn't assume for a moment that he may be completely compromised. Additionally, RoboCop's arrest of Boddicker sends a crystal clear message. Even in the face of the man who ruined his life, Alex Murphy is a police officer who upholds the law. Truth be told, the episode reinforces RoboCop's fundamental identity as a figure of restraint and morality in a corrupt system. Menace of the Mind pretty much functions as the de facto conclusion of the animated series, even though it wasn't explicitly produced as a grand series finale. No farewell, no promotion, just nothing. Like it or not, after Menace of the Mind, RoboCop did not return for a second season. First things first, it was never easy to turn an R-rated satirical property into a sanitized children's cartoon, and I have a good feeling that Rich Fogel and Mark Seidenberg, the show's developers and writers, were aware of the risks involved while creating the animated television series. On the brighter side of things, at least the children who saw the cartoon may not have been aware that it was a closed 12-episode run. They saw it as part of the broader RoboCop franchise, or more accurately, a world that would eventually include the sequels, the live-action television series, and even the 2014 remake for that matter. The animated show didn't receive another season, but there's no reliable contemporary evidence proving that poor ratings or weak toy revenue was the specific reason it ended. What we can safely say is that the original 12-episode order was completed, and no second season followed. Having said that, it was somewhat odd that a figure as iconic and thematically significant as RoboCop did not receive a grand finale in the animated series. I hate to admit it, but RoboCop's last animated case was just another mission. Nothing more, nothing less. The character who outlived his own cartoon. Well, after the 1988 cartoon came to an end, the RoboCop franchise continued to expand. You see, Paul Verhoeven's RoboCop spawned 2 sequels that were released after the cartoon. Here, I'm talking about Irvin Kershner's RoboCop 2, which was written by Frank Miller and Wallen Green, and Fred Decker's RoboCop 3, which was penned by Miller and Decker. Next, there was a live-action television series that was released in 1994, followed by a second animated series called RoboCop Alpha Commando, which was released in 1998. In 2001, we had a live-action miniseries called RoboCop Prime Directives. And then finally, there was a reboot of the first film, Jose Padilla's 2014 cyberpunk superhero movie, also titled RoboCop. And that's not all. A new live-action RoboCop television series was first announced as being in development at Amazon MGM Studios in 2024. In July 2026, Amazon MGM officially greenlit the project as an 8-episode Prime Video series, with Peter Ocko serving as writer, showrunner, and executive producer. So, from what I can make out, the cartoon went poof really quickly, but I can't really say the same for the character. You see, RoboCop as a character isn't going anywhere, and maybe that's why the ending of the animated series didn't sit well with some fans. Did the RoboCop cartoon deserve a real finale? Whether the cartoon deserved a definitive series finale depends on how one views the adaptation's role within the larger franchise. The way I see things, there are 2 rather conflicting perspectives. So hear me out patiently, please. When I look at the cartoon from a narrative and thematic standpoint, I feel it certainly deserved a proper conclusion. I have to admit that, despite being toned down for the Marvel Action Universe block, the cartoon didn't entirely ignore the mature themes of Verhoeven's original film. Backed by writers like Rich Fogel, Mark Seidenberg, Donald F. Glut, John Shirley, Marv Wolfman, and Roger Slifer, the cartoon often addressed heavy concepts such as international terrorism, corporate greed, cybernetic awareness, and ecological destruction, among others. So yes, if there had been a proper closing arc, Alex Murphy could have thoroughly addressed the corruption at the core of OCP, eliminated the persistent threat posed by Dr. McNamara, and come to a definitive conclusion about his stolen human identity and estranged family. But the series ended after 12 episodes with Menace of the Mind. leaving the dystopian conflict permanently frozen in time, despite the cartoon's obvious potential for so much more. Speaking of the contrasting viewpoint, if you tend to look at the structural reality of 1980s television, the cartoon received precisely the treatment it was intended for. I think there's no better way to put it than the fact that the show simply ended after fulfilling its modest episode order. Every episode served its purpose by delivering a self-contained moral lesson, or in simpler words, there was no unresolved cliffhanger. If you take a look at the final episode, it can be seen as a fitting final case. Murphy did get to face Clarence Boddicker, and his handling of the situation demonstrates his preference for the law over fury. Well, I hate to admit it, but I'm pretty much at the end of today's video. But that means I do have a question for all of you. Now that you know how the animated series ended, do you think the cartoon got the ending it deserved? Given the character's R-rated debut, are you okay with the cartoon's kid-friendly send-off, or did you honestly expect a tad more? Please don't hesitate to let me know your thoughts in the comments section below. Now, if you've enjoyed this video, you know what to do. Please leave a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel for more videos like this. As for me, I promise to come back with another favorite video soon. Thanks for watching, and have a better one.